There's one in the back.
Yeah. So for the investor visa, is there any kind of transparency so we know that what kind of money was made? How did this guy make this money which he's bringing in to buy the visa?
So you asked about the cleanliness of the money being used for the $1 million green card program?
I mean, there's...
We have the E2 treaty investor for people coming in on a non-immigrant basis. That has the lower standard of $100,000. But the EB-5 $1 million green card program has specific clean money requirements because Congress was concerned about Colombian drug dealers buying their green card. So you have to show that your money is clean. There's not the same cleanliness concern explicitly in the non-immigrant visa, but you should get down to the laundromat.
Okay. And how do you find that out? Because I was interested in transactions where kickback is taken by foreign governments when there are defense, things that are bought under the defense budget. And that money then it goes into some offshore account, and then it comes here. So what is your procedure of finding out where this money is coming from?
So these things are very, specific to the individual deal and to the individual country and the individual source of the money. It's hard to make generalizations about it. On the one hand, we try not to ask too many questions, but on the other hand, we also want to be intelligent about what we're doing. We want to warn clients about risks that they may face. I think that's about all I can say.
Go ahead.
Figure out like you're still iterating and prototyping and you're kind of like pivoting and kind of seeing like your market.
Right.
Should you create a company first, like a generic one that can do whatever, or like do you wait till you have a good customer base and then register?
Okay, so the question,
does this affect like if you're on like a visa or anything of that sort?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll turn to him at the end and address the visa issue. But I think the question is when to create a company, and it's a really good question. And I would say it is possible to create a company too early, and it's possible to create a company too late. So I think that certainly before you actually launch a product, you want to have it launched by a company. Before you have a website going out that is offering a product, even if it's a free beta, etc. You want to have that. You want to have the limited liability protection that the company gives you. If you're developing something on your own, that's not as important to have a company, but one reason you might want to do it is if it's a group of founders and you want to be clear about the ownership. If you have an entity, you have something to put all the IP into, that you're creating. Where otherwise, if it's just three people who are working together and they're coding and they're creating things, it's not clear. If you end up not proceeding as a team, and one of you goes off and does it, and another one of you goes off and does it, who really owns that code? And you can get into sort of the, what happened with Facebook. They had this multi-million-dollar, litigation about, did Mark Zuckerberg steal the code from these other people who paid for it. So it can be, it can be problematic. But at the same time, you can't just create a new company every time you get an idea. So it's a little bit of a tricky question, and I think you should probably get a little bit of legal advice. And I'm always happy to talk to people about when that right time is to think about creating the company. Now, if you're on let's talk about if you're on an H1 visa and you want to create your own company. I mean, does that create issues? If you're still working for your main employer, does it create issues if you're doing something on weekends? And to actually, is it different if you create a company versus just doing the work on weekends without creating a company? Does it cause you more concern, Jim?
Well, you talk about some are too early and some are too late, and so it's a similar type of situation. A lot of the stuff that you do in your bedroom, in your garage, is really not work without authorization. To basically, it's a hobby, right? Until it starts going somewhere. But when, as you suggest, comes the right time to form the company, other people are being employed, then you're probably starting to get into the work without authorization realm. And the nice thing about almost all visas, if you're an H, you can add additional H employment. If you're an O, you can add additional O employment. So there's some tricks to that stuff. The thing you should know is that you can't be an H for Google and be an O for your own company. So if you're going to do both jobs, you want to get into one of those letters that you could be a lettered employee in the same letter for everybody. But it's not unusual for us to add the founder into the same category they're already at for their main employer as they segue out of that, both financially and on the visa side.
Sorry, just a question. You mentioned when you launch a website. For the website, you can just create like literally seconds.
Sure.
Does that mean you should create a website?
Well, no, I wasn't, not so much just the website, but an actual product. Because the minute you have a product and you're taking people's data, or there could be liability. What I was getting to is like if you're offering a service or offering a product, even if you're not getting paid, you might be exposing yourself to liability, and it's better that the entity have that liability rather than the individual. So that's what I was getting at. If it's just purely a marketing site, it's hard to imagine that unless you're infringing on someone's trademark, it's hard to imagine that you're going to be incurring liability.
Can you talk about the types of how to do the incorporation for startups? Like, do you do the LLC or other types? What's pros and cons in each type?
You mean in terms of
In terms of the tax, you will have that later on. In terms of flexibility.
whether to set up as an LLC or a corporation?
Right.
Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So this is a long, I could spend an hour on this, but to do it in less than a minute, I would say what investors are looking for typically is to invest in a corporation. That's what ultimately, that's what venture capital investors are looking for because of who their limited partners are. They want to invest in a C corporation. Now, if you're not going to go for venture investment right away, there might be tax reasons to set up as an LLC. You can get, if you're putting your own money, you can get losses that you can use right away. So sometimes people set up as an LLC and then convert to a corporation at the time they're going to go raise venture capital. More often, we just set people up as a corporation right away just to keep it simple. Do you have anything there?
Well, the only thing is, when I come back to this qualified small business stock, that only applies for a C corporation, stock issued for a C corporation, and there's a 5-year holding period. So if you think that you're going to start a company and raise capital fairly quickly, and eventually have some type of liquidity event, then you probably want to have a C corporation stock issued for a C corporation to take advantage of the QSBS selection.
Yes, please.
Question regarding the LLC. If you are starting a business, it's a small business, and you are leaning towards LLC, how can you support your own personal assets?
Okay, so if you're starting a business and you're leaning towards an LLC,
Right.
how can you do what?
Like your personal assets, your personal property, that from any other liability. How can you keep that?
How can you
separate?
protect your personal
Right.
assets? Yeah. So it's very important to not to commingle the assets. So you have to have a separate account for the business, even if it's an LLC, or a separate account in the name of the LLC, and put the business money into that. And you shouldn't be using your personal funds directly to support your business. You should be segregating the assets, and that will help a lot doing it that way. Yeah, go ahead.
I think you need to distinguish between a single member LLC that is considered disregarded LLC and a multi-member LLC. With the multi-member LLC, you have to fill out a proper 1065 form and all that. With the single member LLC, you have a situation where the Schedule C, individual tax, is what's used. So the commingling is not as serious an issue as it is in a multi-member LLC.
Okay, so yeah, there you would distinguish, but I think you still, I mean, I think there's a difference between tax concerns and liability in terms of if the LLC is sued by somebody. I think it would make a difference not to commingle, even if it's a single member. You want to, for corporate purposes, you want to maintain a separation between the business and the individual, even though you're right, for tax purposes it would all be disregarded. But you know, I think there still is a benefit to separating the two. Okay, you have a question back there?
Yeah. So I guess I'm wondering, is there a smart way to think about ratcheting and rebalancing the equity structure within the founder? So one thing that I obviously come up with pretty early is a couple of guys will get together and say we'll split it 3 ways or whatnot, and then at some point they realize we probably should rebalance what we decided on day one, but without a funding event it becomes troublesome, or even after the funding event they're now getting options instead of founder share. So is there a smart way to think about that as you kind of start the company and you say, at some point we probably want to reconsider what we started off with and see what really makes sense?
Yeah, no, so kind of rebalancing the founder's equity. I think it's not that easy. You're right, it's a little bit tricky to do. And it is important to have everyone be subject to vesting. So that makes it easier. If someone is fully vested, it's really hard to get those shares back without buying them back. But I think vesting is a way. There is a guy who's been writing books and blogging on this thing called, I think it's called Carving the Pie or Splitting the Pie. You may have seen that. And that really has not taken off. It's a concept of creating an LLC rather than a C Corp and having a much more flexible initial structure where you actually see who's doing what and allocating them per interest based on the real contributions. It sounds good, but it hasn't really taken off in the valley. It's not typically used. It's something you can look at, you can think about, but certainly at the time you get seed investment, that concept doesn't really work well because you need to be sort of a C Corp by that time. So anyway, I think we're pretty much out of time. So thank you so much for coming. And